Carl, you're going to be addressing North Wales Business Club
Yes.
on Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025, St George's Hotel for a 7:30 a.m. start. So,
Mhm.
can you just give us a quick overview of what the talk's going to be about, and then we'll get into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, do you know what? There's two things really I want to get across to any attendee that's coming to the event, but it's really to try to say to them, look, cybersecurity can be a bit of a dark art and a bit of a dull subject, but it affects everyone, right? It affects every business up and down the country, and what we want to try and get across in the call in and presentation is very much to say, look, what can you do differently in 2025? And the two things I'm going to really focus on is the frameworks that businesses can consider to better secure their business. And secondly, what are the new technologies that they can embrace? And if they can take away one or two of those things for the event, then it would have been successful.
Okay, nice. So, yeah, just tell us what you mean by those two things you mentioned. One of them was frameworks. I didn't quite catch the other term.
Embracing new technologies. So for me, a lot of businesses will say we don't really do cyber, or we don't really want to get into cyber. It's not really for us. And what we try to do is say, well, look, whether you like it or not, you've got to get into it because your customers might demand it, or your regulators might dictate it. And rather than wait for regulation to come knocking on the door, we try to say to businesses, get yourself professionalized, get yourself to a best practice now. And the best way to do that is to embrace a framework. Now, it doesn't really matter which standard you adhere to, which one you apply for. We just take the view that any framework is better than having nothing. And it just demonstrates to your staff, to your customers, to your potential investors that you take cybersecurity seriously. And that means that you can take them seriously. So we try to use it as a way of professionalizing a service. And then the other aspect I wanted to touch on for the talk is the latest technologies, right? So I think we're all too aware of AI and its role in the world today. But what we're trying to say to businesses is rather than ignore it and pretend it's going to go away and it's not going to affect you, we try to say to them, let's embrace the potential of AI in your business so that you can outcompete the cybercrime elements that are taking advantage of it.
Well, that's interesting. So, by frameworks, do you mean something like Cyber Essentials, for example? Would that be a framework, or is that sort of a brand?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are lots of different frameworks, both here in the UK and right across the world, and it really depends which level or grade that you want to get to as a business. We do say to most SMBs that Cyber Essentials is a fantastic grounding. So from a government approved perspective, it's what the government has said to all UK businesses. If you're going to do cybersecurity, you should consider getting Cyber Essentials certified. Now, we work with a number of certifying authorities across the UK, and obviously Cyber Essentials is one accolade that we can work with. And obviously, we're going to touch on in the talk one of the members that we've worked with closely and how we went from initial inquiry through to getting them Cyber Essentials certified and then going on to getting the more advanced certification, which is Cyber Essentials Plus. But whichever sticker that you want to acquire, we can work with you in an impartial capacity to get you there.
Right. So, on the one hand, we live in you mentioned regulation and I suppose compliance. So we live in a more and more regulated and compliant world, and nobody likes regulations and compliance on the face of it. Um, so so the other question is how big a problem is cyber security and cyber risks. In reality, how are businesses getting impacted by this?
Do you know what? It's an interesting topic because you don't necessarily see it or hear it every day. We all hear horror stories in the newspapers or online about a big PLC getting a cyber attack or a big brand getting a cyber attack, and it almost feels disconnected to your local S&B up the high street. But the truth is, here in North Wales, and this is from North Wales Police, over 50% of all crime is cybercrime. So what that's telling you is there is a huge invisible sort of epidemic of crime, and it's primarily low level. So it could be, someone's clicked on a link inadvertently in a business. They perhaps sent payment details to the wrong supplier, or they've been intercepted, or something's happened and it's relatively low level. It hasn't necessarily completely derailed the business, but they've just realized that someone's taken advantage of them and they need to report it, and they need to then stop it from happening again. Now that is massively underreported, because it's not going to make the headlines for Wrexham.com or anyone like that, because it's just not noteworthy enough. But it happens on such a high volume that it does represent half of all crime in North Wales. But where it really matters is where we work with businesses that have had a fundamental attack on their business and operations. And if they've lost data, it's about, have they actually got prepared for such an eventuality? Have they actually invested in a good backup so that they can recover from the current situation? And what we find is a lot of businesses might find that they've run out of road, and they are literally pressing all the alarm bells, going, how do we get our data back? How do we get our business back? How are we going to make payroll this month? How are we going to run any of our business without any of our systems? Because pen and paper and manual methods can only go on for so long. And what we've discovered over the years is that if you can survive the first 3 to 4 days, and you've got a partner trying to help you recover your data and work out how it happened, work out where it went wrong and what you can do about and making sure it doesn't happen again, you have a good chance of surviving it as an event. And that's definitely put us in good stead with those companies, because what has happened afterwards is that they then said, we wouldn't be trading if it wasn't for your team rescuing our data and getting us back on. So that's really where we build credibility and trust with individuals. But I would say most businesses, if they don't have that ability to do something in the first few days, it becomes catastrophic for them, and you don't hear about it. They just go pop in the night, and no one ever hears from them ever again.
Well, that's interesting, yeah. And also what you were saying about having the backups alongside all the other protections. Yeah, I'm just thinking, when someone does, I think this is quite a hot topic, cyber insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people might think, well, I'll pay the money for the policy, and
yeah,
if anything happens, I'm covered. What's the actual reality of that?
Yeah, cross my fingers. Hopefully, it pays out, right? I think it's gone on quite a long way. I mean, cyber insurance didn't even exist, did it? A few years back, you go back 8-9 years, it probably wasn't even a thing, and certainly wasn't available to most S&Bs. What we've seen is a trend that probably 5-6 years ago, commercial insurers were attaching it as an optional upgrade, and it almost kind of said to businesses, look, you've got a cyber insurance policy now, don't worry about it. If anything goes wrong, your policy will pay out. Well, what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years is an increase awareness in insurers, if you like, demanding that end users know exactly what's going on with their IT, know exactly how their data is backed up. And in a way, they're kind of saying to them, have you got Cyber Essentials as a certificate? Do you follow the standards? So what we're seeing increasingly is, whereas Cyber Essentials might be a framework of, say, maybe 100 questions for a business to answer and address, an insurer might provide them a selection of those questions. And if they can't answer them, what it's really starting to highlight is, would the underwriter and would the insurer actually provide cover in the first place? And what we're finding is businesses that, if you like, didn't necessarily get Cyber Essentials and just bought cyber insurance policies, are now starting to work out whether they're even covered in the event of a claim. Because I think it's one thing having a policy and paying a few £100 a year for it, but it's another thing whether or not it actually pays out in the event of an attack or an issue. Because if the insurers can argue that a business didn't take the right level of precautions, didn't invest in the right level of security, didn't do the right things, it'd be like you and me in the event of any domestic claim. They're not necessarily going to pay out. And I think we're going to see a bit of a perfect storm of the number of insurers that are going to get to a position where they can't afford to pay out on the number of claims. So part of the theme of the talk, where we're talking about, we've got a bit of a nautical theme being based in Llandudno next week, but we're trying to say that all businesses, whether they like it or not, are going to have to increase their awareness of cyber, just so that they are better protected from the storms that are coming. So does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, I think that's good. I suppose it's hard to put a number to the percentage of successful claims.
Yeah, I mean, I think
at this
the
stage.
reality is, yeah, I think if any business says I've got cyber essentials, I've done everything I can to safeguard my people, my data, my systems, and then they have a compromise, I think they'd be well within their rights to expect an insurer to pay out. I think the balance of probability would go against them if they haven't done anything about doing some basics. Like even we've met businesses that haven't even tested their backups. So if they haven't tested their backup, how do they even know that if they relied on it, they could carry on doing business? And I think it'd be remiss of a lot of businesses to expect an insurer to pay out in that scenario.
So we've got two sides to cybersecurity. We've got all the technical clever stuff and putting the right structure in and philosophies, and then we've got education of the actual users.
Yeah.
Where does that fit into your service?
So we do actually we try to provide a holistic service, right? So we go in and try to do the technical audit aspects first and say, look, this is what you need to improve. This is how you can make yourself more secure. But the individual or the user is the human firewall, right? So we're all infallible. We're all human beings. We can all click by accident on an email sent at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon to say, urgent, read this, urgent, you need to action this. So we do provide user awareness training services to our customers. But we often say to businesses, look, before you invest in user awareness training, you ought to look at frameworks. You ought to look at getting the basics put in right first, because otherwise you're basically building on weak foundations for the business. So we kind of sort of look at user awareness training and whether you call it phishing prevention or education or whatever you want to call it, we tend to look at that after we've taken care of the basics.
That's brilliant. That's a really good overview. Thank you, Carl Hargreave, Foundry. Carl, where can we find more information about you and your service?
Thank you very much, Paul. So we're based on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can connect with me, or you can follow the business page under Security Foundry. And whether we like it or not, we're still on Twitter. It's a bit of a hot topic whether people are on Twitter anymore. But what we find is Twitter is a fantastic place for very, very quick responses to cybersecurity issues. So basically, if something goes bang somewhere on the planet, our engineers are on it almost immediately, and it's usually sourced from Twitter. So Twitter, Security Foundry is our handle. We've got a number of followers both on LinkedIn and on Twitter or X.
That's brilliant. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you on the 20th of March. And thank you very much for your time today.
That's brilliant. Looking forward to it, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.